Welcome back to Illinois Extension Series with Matt Schmidt in the Illinois Office of Broadband. And we're especially thankful to have Bill Coleman and Adrian Furness and Angie Cooper on today from the Benton Institute for Broadband Society and from Heartland Forward. The Accelerate Illinois Broadband Infrastructure Planning Program includes a notice of collaboration, which is now available, and accepting applications from local governments through December 30th. I'll let Matt, Director of the Illinois Office of Broadband, orient everyone to our presentation of this program today. Thank you again, Matt, and over to you.
All right, well, thanks once again, Nancy, and to University Extension for the opportunity to partner with you on this webinar series. If you've heard us in the past weeks, we are stressing the importance of this historic moment for local communities to enter the broadband conversation and really guide their future when it comes to broadband connectivity. And so today we're really excited to announce and to speak to a specific program, an intense 14-week session designed for local communities, our Accelerate Illinois program, helping local communities look at the resources that are currently available to them and talk through next steps to put these resources to use. And so partnerships, collaboration is the name of the game. We've stressed it's an all hands on deck approach, and that's what you see here today. Bringing together the Office of Broadband, the state of Illinois, University Extension, the Illinois-based Benton Institute for Broadband and Society, and of course, Heartland Forward and their Connecting the Heartland initiative. And so I think we're going to get most out of today. If I say less, I'd like to make a big introduction to Angie Cooper from Heartland Forward. Your support for what we're doing here in Illinois is so incredibly important to make this program possible, to raise awareness around the emergency broadband benefit and so much more. And so with that said, Angie, I'd like to pass the mic to you before I pass it to Bill.
Great, thanks, Matt. I appreciate it. It's great to be on today with you and other partners like Benton Institute and other leaders across the state. For those of you who might not be familiar with Heartland Forward, we call ourselves a think and do tank with a mission to improve economic performance in the center of the United States. And in the wake of the pandemic, we launched a new initiative called Connecting the Heartland to expand access to affordable high-speed internet access. We're doing this work in Illinois and 3 other states in the Heartland. And over the past several months, to give you an idea of sort of what we've been up to, we ran awareness campaigns with more than a dozen partners in states to help ensure eligible families were able to sign up for the emergency broadband benefit program. So those that needed additional assistance to afford high-speed internet access were able to do that. We also are supporting American Connection Corps fellows in 4 Illinois communities to provide extra local capacity for broadband and access and equity and work. And during this, we know it's historic investments at the federal level coming down to states. We really applaud, Matt, the work that you're doing and the governor's leadership in commitments to close the digital divide. It really does put Illinois in a very exciting position to connect every home, business, and institution in the state. And one of the things, as we've been working in Illinois and in communities across the state, as well as the other states that we're focused in, one of the strongest things, and we believe is important, that communities drive the process, so the investments made in the near term will serve the best interest of those in the long term. But the theme, again, that we've repeatedly heard over and over from communities, especially smaller ones, is they might not be prepared to take advantage of the opportunity or have the capacity to do that. So we've worked with you, Matt, the Office of Broadband and the Benton Institute to bring the Accelerate Illinois program and make it real and to help fill this gap. So we're proud to support the local broadband planning and capacity building, and believe Accelerate Illinois program can serve as a model truly for other states in the heartland. So we thank all of you for jumping in to help your communities, and for everything that our partners with Benton Institute and others are doing to make this a reality. And we're just pleased to partner and excited to get started.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Angie. I can't tell you how much we appreciate the collaboration and the support. And so let's get started. Let's learn more about the Accelerate Illinois program. For those of you familiar with our Illinois Connected Communities program, you know the voice of Bill Coleman. And so he'll be guiding this program forward and our time together for the rest of the hour. Bill Coleman, take it away.
Thank you so much, Matt. It's great to launch this program in Illinois. And I know it to be highly effective. It's kind of born out of the pandemic, created by the Blandon Foundation in rural Minnesota to help rural leaders move forward relatively quickly to build a team and get prepared to make broadband projects happen. And so ultimately, this is a program purpose to educate and support your community teams as you create your vision and pursue the best possible broadband solution. I couldn't agree with Angie anymore about this locally driven solution and local influence on what kind of broadband is deployed, when and where in your communities, in your counties, in your rural regions. Having that community voice, having that influence can ensure that you have the broadband your community will need, not just today or tomorrow, but a generation into the future. And so this is really about creating these empowered community teams to make things happen. So as you think about this and you think about your program possibly happening in your community or county, I'd encourage you to think about who really needs to be on this team in terms of technical skills, in terms of leadership, in terms of can-do attitude to make sure that positive results happen. This is the Illinois Broadband Map, and if you're in the yellow areas, you really need this program. Those are the areas that have services for fixed broadband, for wired broadband, that are something less than 25 down and 3 up. We know that that 25/3 standard is really totally inadequate for the uses of today, with multiple video conferences going on in households on sometimes many hours in the day, with 1 or 2 people working from home, with possibly 5 or 6, 7 people going to school, either from K-12 through higher ed. And so there's a lot of areas that are eligible for this program. And so think about, how can you make this happen in your area? This program has really got the 4 phases of it. It's a 14-week program, so a relatively short time frame. It's an intensive planning process, but we work on leadership education throughout the process, that we bring your team the knowledge it needs to be able to rationally and knowledgeably have a great discussion, fact-based discussion about the broadband opportunities in your community. And I just want to emphasize, when I talk community, that could be a city, or it could be a market area of a community, or we've seen this program work very well at the county level, where you're bringing together really the key stakeholders from across that area that can work together for ubiquitous broadband across a pretty good area. Bigger areas tend to get a little clunkier with so many stakeholders. Smaller areas, maybe there's not enough power in the group to be able to do this kind of work. So the county is really a great level of geography to use to organize this effort. We spend a lot of time gathering information from consumers, from providers, from state agencies, from broadband experts in finance and engineering technology. And then we spend the last month or so really looking at what are those opportunities for your community to move forward. Who are the best provider partner prospects? What kind of technology will really meet your vision that you're planning certainly tied to the geography of your area and those kind of constraints. And by the end of this, come out with a well-supported plan that there's a consensus behind that, again, with your leadership team to move forward. And ultimately then reporting to your own community. That's so important to, once you have a plan, to spread that message throughout your community. And so we spend time on that, on the messaging that's so important as you move forward. When we think about leadership education, one of the key parts of this is a series of archived webinars. And we started this program in Minnesota using webinars from the Blandin Foundation. For the Illinois program, we're going to use a combination of Blandin webinars that we've done through the Office of Broadband in Benton, and maybe some other best practice webinars that we can find. But we bring in experts on broadband, on finance, on the whole range of surveying and mapping that will really help the communities understand their situation. We do this in a cohort approach where our plan is to have 6 Illinois communities participate at a time. We're ultimately going to pick 12 communities to participate through this NOFO or NOCO process, but run them through in cohorts of 6. And we find that there's great knowledge sharing between the communities, and letting, ultimately knowing that your community isn't alone in this journey is really a powerful force. And when we have these 6 communities working together and sharing their story, that's really reinforcing and supportive to everyone's efforts. We spend a lot of time just with your team meeting by itself. And so over this 14-week period, we meet our plan is to meet every Thursday morning from 8:30 to 10:30. And the first hour is devoted to that experts and inter-community discussions. That last hour is your team discussion, where you discuss your own progress and next steps, discuss your vision, and so on, your own local strategy. And then we ask you to do a community survey, and with extension support, we're able to provide you with a pretty, I think, a great survey that asks appropriate questions. We help you with that data gathering and then the analysis. Broadband provider interviews, both your existing providers, your incumbents, and prospective broadband partners. The incumbents, it's always good to talk with them. Obviously, if they improve their networks, that would solve a lot of issues. Understanding what it's going to take to have them do that is important. But it's also important to say that you've talked with your incumbent providers and given them the opportunity to meet the community needs. But also identifying those provider partners that may be new to the area that would come in and build new networks in public-private partnerships is a big part of this as well. Looking at the maps, not only the state of Illinois maps, but some other, we've seen the importance now of these interactive maps that have so many layers of population, topography, grant program, eligibility, these maps now. And if you have a great GIS department in your counties, they can be your best friend in terms of broadband planning. So we really encourage that kind of integration, and seeing these maps is so powerful, really tells the story. And then integrating the speed test data that can demonstrate maybe where the maps are less correct than we would hope. Sometimes maps show that the people are served. If everyone who takes a speed test in an area that's shown as served is getting 10 megabits as opposed to 25 or higher, that can really be, again, evidence of broadband need. And we're seeing increased openness to these different forms of broadband documentation by funders. And so I think that's a real important piece. And then the information gathering, again, you can see this, again, the speed test data, talking to the providers, the maps, and then public finance tools, federal and state dollars that Illinois is blessed with a large fund. The federal government, both through the ARPA program and from the new infrastructure bill, tremendous resources coming, but local governments also have tools that they can bring to bear to sweeten the pot, to make things happen. And so we'll examine those as well. And then that opportunity analysis. I'll spend time with each community over kind of the final 2 weeks of the program. We'll have 1 or 2 planning sessions, depending on the need, to kind of create your final plan, to hash out those issues amongst your team members. Remember, if you have diverse voices on your team, there's going to be discussions about what is the best course, both short-term and long-term, so we can help with that. And so we'll take the time with your own communities to bring your customized plans for your community. We'll look at those different partnership arrangements and all kinds of different ownership and operational models, looking at the financial tools that make sense for your communities and so on. These are plans that you create. I want to emphasize that this program is not like hiring a consultant who will come in a period of 12 weeks, deliver you a plan. This will be your plan. And I think that really makes it a lot more powerful and implementable over the short-term future. And then this report to the community, identifying that right public format or formats, county boards, community broadband focused meeting. We've seen communities go out and do multiple presentations to townships and school boards and all kinds of stakeholders to really build that community consensus about what you're proposing. Especially if there's a strong public role, you need to have that strong public support in your program. We know that when you spread the word about what you're trying to do, you'll find additional community champions who will aid your effort, who know things about technology or finance, ready to go out and knock on doors and build that support. So, and from there, then pursue your preferred solution. And we've seen, we launched this program initially last spring in Minnesota, and we've seen about $8 million so far of public financing into those communities, with applications pending for a lot more. So we know that these communities can make great progress in a relatively short period of time, and being prepared for these opportunities and knowing what's satisfactory for you is a tremendous benefit of this program. We always think we want great partnerships with providers. If your community has its act together and knows what it wants and knows what it's willing to do, you can be a great partner. And that's one of the things we know, is that there's not nearly enough great provider partners out there for all the community needs. And so you want to differentiate yourself to be prepared and be reliable, to make decisions, make commitments to providers. And that's something they're really looking forward to. And so our plan is to meet weekly, as I mentioned. Our plan is to start February 3rd. And so during the applications are due at the end of this year. Our group will convene quickly after and make choices and notify communities. And then it's a pretty intense schedule where we think about surveys and provider interviews, and you can see this schedule. We do build some time in there, that March 17th and 24th, a little bit of a breather opportunity to get those tasks done, the surveys and the provider interviews and so on, before we jump into the idea about feasibility studies and the financing. We make those local plans, and then we do give you an opportunity to practice your presentation to the cohort communities. And that's has proven to be a real nice touch to be able to see how other communities present their information, get some feedback from the other communities before you bring that plan out to the to your own local community. And again, we do ask that team members watch a webinar during the week prior to that topical meeting. To apply for this program, you can review the NOCO, and but the most important thing is to recruit your team. And we want at least 8 people on your team really committed to attend these meetings and participate. And that's really important. And that should be, you know, key community stakeholders, economic development, elected officials, maybe broadband providers, key community members who really can influence public policy. Having a technology background is nice. We don't need everyone to be, you know, IT directors and so on. In fact, we'd rather have folks that are more of the top, the stakeholders, the influencers, than in an alt IT kind of group. So they tend to look at the trees, and we need people who can look at the forest as well of the local community environment. And so the 12/30 is the application deadline. At that point, we hope to pick our 12 communities. We'll do our first 6 starting in February, and then the second 6 starting in May. And so that's the program, and I wanted to kind of hurry through that. And then I'm going to turn it over now to Adrienne Furness, who's going to give kind of a closing and pitch for this program before we open it up for Q&A. Adrienne?
Thanks, Bill. First of all, it's a great turnout. I want to thank Matt and Angie and Bill for outlining the program. I thought I would take this opportunity to summarize some key points since we've presented a lot of information during this time so far. So I think it's clear that we're offering the program because Illinois communities stand to receive a significant amount of funding for broadband infrastructure. And obviously, Bill mentioned the $1 trillion federal infrastructure plan. The state of Illinois has its own $400 million capital plan, and there are funds available through ARPA, or the American Rescue Plan Act, which will soon be made available for communities to apply for. And community planning support offered through initiatives like Accelerate Illinois will help even the playing field so that more cities and counties, regardless of their size or staffing, can prepare to submit applications for capital dollars to help transform broadband in their communities. Now, as Bill said, who's eligible? Local units of government, particularly cities, counties, and multi-county regions. But the program is targeted at counties that are in their initial stages of broadband planning, or those wishing to refresh existing broadband plans that have not yielded results, or where community initiatives have fizzled out and need a little bit of lighting the fire under the proverbial behind. And as we say, Bill will let you know it's 14 weeks, meeting on Thursday. It's a combination of webinars and discussion. You have to do some work in between the Thursday meetings, but what we're giving with the help of Heartland Forward is we're providing this 30 hours of expert counsel at no cost to the communities. And as Bill went through, I think it's really clear that this is about leadership education and a process to gather information, and engages communities to identify broadband goals, understand available funding options, and target capital dollars to support the implementation. I know there was one person in the chat who said, oh my God, they can't get their act together in December. I have looked at the NOCO. It is not pages and pages and pages long. This is a pretty straightforward application process. So before saying you can't participate, I'd absolutely make sure to get in and look at the NOCO. And as Bill said, we're going to choose 12 communities to go through the program. So there's only one NOCO process, which Nancy has just posted in the chat. And then we have the first six communities starting at the beginning of February and going through mid-May, and one starting mid-May and running through the end of August. So I am really heartened by the fact that we have 70 odd people on this call. I'm looking forward to spending some time looking at the list, getting acquainted. Please feel free. I think Bill has left his, maybe Bill, you can put the slide up with your contact information again, so that if you do want to reach out to us and ask questions, please feel free to do so. And thank you again for your interest. Thank you for the state of Illinois Office of Broadband's collaboration on this, and a big shout out to Heartland Forward and their team for philanthropically backing this program. So thanks again, guys. Really looking forward to working with everybody early next year. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you. I'll share my screen there with the contact information, but I'm not going to go full screen on it so I can actually see people's faces when asking questions. But thanks for in the chat. We've a fair number of questions here. And so one question is, what's the plan to turn as much as possible this technology back to the private sector for long-term operation? And I want to emphasize that each community really will create their own plan and their best approach. And so I suspect as we go through that, we'll see different attitudes towards public sector ownership with a private sector operator. We might just see a public-private partnership where public dollars flow to broadband providers in some kind of negotiated arrangement with or without additional public benefits like shared fiber networks and so on. So each community will try and find their best path forward. And I think we'll find out that when there's willing provider partners, then most communities will select those public-private options that relieve them of that long-term responsibility of constructing networks and owning them and or operating them. That most community leaders would just as soon leave that to the private sector. But where we see, there's multiple examples of where the public sector has really been more active and it's been quite successful. But those are going to be local choices that communities make when they set their vision early in the process and adjust that as time goes on. That will drive those kind of choices. I see that Adrienne mentioned about the next opportunity. We'll have to see how these opportunities go, how these cohort goes, and see, by the time we're done with these two cohorts, we'll be in late August and see what the demand is and see what the results of these efforts have been before funders would commit to additional work. The role of the broadband providers in this planning process. If you have a broadband provider partner that you've identified, having them at the table throughout this process, I think can be really informative. If you've got a broadband provider or providers that you'd love to have as partners, bringing them into the process and having them sit on the team. We've seen examples of that being very successful, not only in that relationship building and in those ongoing discussions, but also in just the education of the community leaders of that provider perspective. You really begin to understand what they need in order to make the investment in your community. And so that can be very positive. If you're, if you're at an impasse with your incumbent providers and you're thinking about, we need a new provider partner, inviting the incumbents into that process might be counterproductive, I could see, if they're resistant and kind of, not being a real true partner in this process. So whoever's at the table with you, you want them to be kind of on your side, on your team. And so I think that's an important consideration about provider partners. And I'm going to speak for Matt here. There's a question about, will the state of Illinois prioritize planning projects that come out of these processes? And I would suspect that the state of Illinois is going to recognize high quality projects no matter where they originate. But we know that if a community participates in this program, that its applications, that it's either submitting itself or participating in with a private provider, are going to be top notch, and so well worthy of consideration. But I don't see there's any additional points in the grant for specific participation here, although I do think the grant application recognizes and rewards partnerships and planning. Matt, do you have anything else on that?
No, Bill, I think you said it well. And I think that the fact that a community would go through this program and leverage some of its available resources, ARPA or otherwise, to make a project happen, that just really speaks to the thoughtfulness and the community's commitment to its broadband vision. And so no specific points for this specific collaboration, but it really prepares communities well to do well in our Connect Illinois program. Good. And Daniel's second half of that question is about articulate any principles that should be universal and common to all local planning efforts. We'll certainly expose all those principles, examples like affordability or increasing competition, or the idea of open access networks, again, competition. But I think each community will end up finding what's most important to them in achieving their broadband mission. And so many communities would love to have one high quality provider and would think that was great compared to what they have now. And so the idea of competition might not be as important to them. Let's just say they're in a quite rural area with a few customers per mile. Competition might be a tough objective to get multiple providers interested in that marketplace. But if they could get the one provider interested, that would be a great victory for them. And so each community will decide on its own, kind of what are and that's part of the vision process that we do. We launch early, but really continues throughout the program as community leaders become more informed and they develop more consensus. Those community folks, when they decide what kind of partnership do they want, those principles that come out of their vision will help drive that negotiated private partnership. So great to see Johari talking about being ready with their team. Again, the team is the hardest part of that application, getting 8 to 12 to, we've had a team of 16 folks that they committed to be, at the meeting every, in this case, Thursday meeting for 14 weeks. And we understand that life intervenes. We don't take attendance, but we're really looking for the commitments of people to participate. And we also know that just like school, there's homework, and work has to happen between meetings for progress to be made. So again, I would not underestimate the intensity of this effort. When we think about community broadband planning efforts, many times those extend over 6 months or more, and this we're doing in 14 weeks. So there is work involved, and as Matt would say, all hands on deck in a community to get surveys done and to interview providers and to do the hard work that's necessary to, building a consensus in your community is the hardest work.
to understand what's good enough, what's our time frame, how important are things like affordability or competition, or the idea of an open access network, or even deciding what's the appropriate public sector role. We have communities that want to be involved as little as possible, see this as a private sector function. We have other people on teams that say, hey, if we're going to spend all this public money, this should be publicly owned. And both of those can be valid points of view, but you have to understand what's right for our community and come behind a consensus approach, so that when you do talk to prospective provider partners, that they're not coming to a meeting and people in the community are still hashing out these issues. So I think, again, to be a great partner with a broadband provider, having your own act together is a critical piece of that. Are there other questions? Comments? One of the slides, and I'm going to go back to it, this one. Where's your community at in this process as of today? We know that with the pandemic, with the federal funding, the state funding, there's been a tremendous increase in the interest levels of communities. And so some communities may have already done a survey, and if that survey is recent and you're good with it, we're not going to say, oh, do another survey. But it's the farther along you are in this planning process. I got an email from a community yesterday, and they've already submitted a grant application for, across their entire county with a provider partner. Clearly the value of this program would be less than if somebody is kind of more at that beginning stages where they've had some meetings or talked about broadband in their community, but haven't had as much activity. So those communities that are really beginning the process, or as Adrienne said, maybe they did some kind of effort a couple of years ago without much result. So they want to renew that, refresh it. Those are really the communities that will benefit the most. But if you're interested, even if you are down the road on this, as Adrienne said, the application process is not difficult. And so the idea of putting in an application, and we'll have to see kind of the group of applications we get. And we want to obviously pick the communities where we can do the most good. And so you may or may not be selected in the process. But I'd still encourage you to apply if you're interested. So Andy asked about the local units of government only. And we do want a local unit of government sponsor. Some of our programs, we've Illinois Connected Communities, led by the school district. It's a little bit out of the bounds of what school districts generally do. We'd love to have school districts involved on the teams, but it's, infrastructure, community infrastructure, economic development is really a key player. If you're a community economic development group in a community, if they want to be the lead organization, but have the community, the city government be the sponsor, be the applicant, or the county, understanding that a different group might take the lead in terms of the day-to-day management of that program, that's going to be fine. But I think it's important that the solutions here generally are going to involve local units of government. And so to have them kind of on board at the beginning, we think is critical.
I was also thinking, Bill, and wanted to maybe ask the question to you. You were talking about how important it was to do the initial team building and I wonder also is, what I wonder also is if you're trying to consider which team members, maybe some communities have maybe too many people and they need to get a tight group together or something that they know will also represent the community. But I wonder what your thoughts on private or public or nonprofit partnerships as well, and how people can maneuver and utilize those networks for parts of the project that you you talk about with this planning program. So, you know, the different phases with survey distribution and other things.
Well, I think having, I'd welcome a chance to see a team that was too big. I think it'd be, when you have more stakeholders involved, you know, you can certainly work in some committees and so on, and work in small groups and have those kind of discussions. But if, you know, we've had, as I mentioned, groups of up to, I think it was 16 or more on one of these teams. And that was a real powerful kind of consensus builder. And they actually had a majority, a quorum of their county board members participating. And so they had actually, for open meeting laws, had to notice these meetings as being open to the public. And they actually live streamed them out to their community. So I think a bigger group is better. You know, it's one of the most important things within your community is to have these tentacles out in your community to build that support, to the people network that's going to come to the forefront when it's time to commit local dollars or push forward in new and different ways that might make some people uncomfortable. So, but I think there's, as we think about a lot of these, especially like the survey parts of this, to have more community partners promoting that survey, whether that's the chamber or the school district or Lions Club or the churches or whoever's got a communication vehicle, either printed or online, to make that available for folks. And so that is really important to, as you think about this, getting that message out to the community when you establish that vision, to share that and let people start to buy into these kind of ways of thinking and the approach. And I think over the last 18 months, we've seen, you know, such a change in kind of public realization about the importance of broadband. Some of that battle has been won, but it's also still present once you start to commit public dollars. So more connection throughout the community is great. So this is quite a bit of work. This is a self, you know, the planning, you know, we lead you through it, but it's really, it's not a product that's delivered to you. It's one you create. The plan we create, you know, certainly we have help you with has got, you know, maps and so on, but it's not a large document. It really comes down to the real priorities of the community. It's kind of in a PowerPoint format that, you know, something less than 20 slides of what the community consensus is and the next steps and so on. So it, I just want to set those expectations again, that we help you create your plan. And we're certainly here to help in any way and attend additional meetings for your community, whatever you need to do to be successful. But it's essentially a little bit of a self-help plan.
We did have a question that came in that they're wondering, should a county government reach out to other counties for regional connectivity? And so if you want to precise if there's any sort of scope of the entity that would be sort of an ideal applicant, or if that is even a limitation, or what are your thoughts on regional?
Yeah, you know, I think getting together at the regional level, in one of our cohorts in Minnesota, it just turned out that the applicants were all kind of from one region. And so their focus is on creating their own county plans. but because we're meeting as this group, there was a lot of interaction during the meetings and then between the meetings about different providers. We know that providers don't care anything about city lines or county lines. They're looking at markets and, road miles and those kind of things. I guess I would recommend that in this program, that if you wanted to collaborate with a nearby county, next door county, or 2 or 3, I'd encourage them to apply to participate in the program and each have their own team. Get your own act together as a partner and decide what you want to do, and then be able to collaborate with those nearby counties on the opportunities. I think once you start to do multi-county, I think that'd be complicated in this compressed time frame that we have. It's certainly possible, and it might be also on the size of the counties in terms of number of people and how big those counties are geographically. We'd say, well, we should do a state broadband plan, and that's all well and good, but you lose some of that specific value. The bigger you get, the more general your plan becomes. And so we think the county level is kind of the right combination of, it's a chunk that you can really bite off and manage and come up with specific plans. One of the things that we've seen with the federal programs now and the existing programs, Rural Digital Opportunity Fund program that was funded by the FCC last year, that it's really become micro-targeting in some cases about how to get broadband to a particular place with a particular provider partner with a particular funding program. Because all the funding programs have different criteria. Some emphasize poverty, some emphasize business development. And so it really becomes what program is going to be right for a particular place. And so I think you lose the ability to do that micro-targeting the bigger geography you have. We'd love to have the regional planning commissions involved. I think they have some great GIS capabilities that maybe some of the, especially smaller counties, might not have. And I think that's a tool we want to have available to the team, is that mapping.
Yeah, there are some really useful tools that are now well developed to do this sort of service to communities. And I really want to just thank you and all the partners on the line that have worked hard to get such a nice program geared up for everybody. And it sounds like a wonderful opportunity, and I'm looking forward to it as well. I want to pass the mic back to Matt briefly as the hour is winding down. We do have some more questions coming in, so thanks so much for putting those questions in the chat box. Matt, go ahead and see if you have any other comments, and if not, I know that Bill, you can take up the rest of the hour too, as well as Adrian. So thank you very much, Matt.
Thanks again, Nancy. And yeah, folks, if you know us, if you put all of us on a webinar together, there's hardly time for us to talk. It's a great thing. We love the issue, and hopefully that comes across. One point that I just wanted to emphasize is just the resources that are available directly to local governments. I've said this before, but in Illinois, over $6 billion go directly to our local governments from the American Rescue Plan Act. More than enough funding to solve our broadband challenges forever, or at least for the foreseeable future. In addition to that funding, we have the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. We have our own Connect Illinois grant program, which was nation leading at its inception in terms of the size of the state commitment to broadband ubiquity throughout the state. The point is, and I'm going to say this again, this is the best time we've ever seen to solve broadband connectivity challenges at the local level. And as I'd mentioned, there's not a one-size-fits-all approach. What we really want to try to do is inspire local leaders who may be on the fence, know that there are broadband connectivity challenges, know there's a lot of activity out there, but might not feel comfortable taking that first step. The Office of Broadband and our great collaborators who are on the webinar with us today, we're here to help. And we want to help you get from point A to point B. And perhaps you go through this program and you realize, you know what, this just isn't for us. But what we're looking for are communities that are at the cusp of wanting to do more and drive that solution and be part of the conversation. And so in the weeks that follow, take a look at that notice of collaboration opportunity for our Accelerate Illinois program. We think it's going to be a model for other states to replicate in terms of the kind of engagement that will help communities be more savvy and sophisticated. And again, when you look at the kind of partnerships that emanate from this work, there's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And so if a community has an approach that they're more comfortable with, we want to try to find that approach and make it work with you. And so again, if you've got any questions, Bill's a great resource. You always can contact the Office of Broadband at broadband@illinois.gov. We try to get back to folks right away. And again, I would just really encourage folks to look at this program. And if you're a local unit of government that might be interested in maybe a multi-county approach, I think Bill's comment is spot on. Apply for your county or for your city. And then after we receive applications, maybe there's some synergy or some collaboration among jurisdictions that can unfold. Control what you can. And I think that means talking to your colleagues within your jurisdiction, getting an application in, and we really want to work with you because we think the structured engagement that this program offers is going to really be, well, the difference maker for a lot of our local communities. So again, unprecedented opportunity here with the funding that's available. We want to help you. And so don't be shy to ask and reach out. Again, thank you to Angie and Heartland Forward and to Adrienne, Benton Institute, Bill, your great contribution, and of course, Nancy with Extension. We just really appreciate all the collaboration.
Bill, Adrienne, do you have anything to say before we wrap up today?
I've answered a few questions in the chat, and feel free to reach out to me, bcoleman@benton.org, and happy to chat with you about your local community, and even be willing to do a quick check-in if you have a group you wanted to convince that this would be a good opportunity. Nancy has mentioned that she'll send out a link today with the webinar video, so folks, you can pass it on to folks that might be interested.
Yep, I would just remind everybody that if you don't have, if you didn't fill out a registration form for this and you want to direct message me your email, you'll definitely be receiving those materials.
Thanks, everyone. I look forward to working with you.
Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate you being here. It was a great turnout. Thanks so much.